record to my computer. My name is Maddie Jones. I use she, hers pronouns, and I'm the ASUM Sustainability Coordinator. And I'm really excited to see some folks here to join us to celebrate Campus Sustainability Month. I know everyone is on Zoom a lot, so I really appreciate you voluntarily adding another Zoom to your life. I want to start by acknowledging that the University of Montana sits on occupied and stolen Kalispel and Salish land. And I want to acknowledge and recognize the harm and generational trauma caused and perpetuated by settlers, and also acknowledge and honor the path shown by Indigenous peoples in caring for this place for generations to come.
Thank you for that. My name is Patrick Yawakie. I am a Zuni Pueblo, enrolled member of the Zuni Pueblo and out of New Mexico. I am also a Turtle Mountain Anishinaabe, as well as a White Bear Nakota Cree out of Saskatchewan in Canada. It's been an honor to be able to live here on the Flathead Reservation. I was able to go to SKC, Salish Kootenai College, which is a tribal college for the Confederated Salish Kootenai Tribes, where I received a bachelor's in tribal administration and governance in 2019. And I've been working on food sovereignty and also important, tribal voting rights and tribal get out the vote since 2016 when I arrived here. My education has really helped me be able to advocate for food sovereignty here on the reservation, especially for the tribal community, the members of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, who not just are my neighbors, but I'm also married to a tribal member and have children who are tribal members. So as a father of tribal members and as a husband of a tribal member, it is kind of very important to me, also maybe a duty as a father and as a husband to try to come up with solutions for current issues that we're facing here in the community, and for the advocacy of a better tomorrow. And so with food sovereignty, I've been able to help create a food sovereignty initiative for the Flathead Reservation community. This was created in 2016 with multiple meetings with local community members and local tribal leaders, local business owners and food producers, just trying to assess the current food system that exists here on the Flathead Reservation, as well as community needs, and be able to put that into a document which we presented to Confederate Salish Kootenai Tribal Council in July 2016. With that advocacy and my education, I was able to also present in 2017 at CSKT's Northwest Tribal Climate Summit, which kind of exposed me to other tribal leaders in the region and their perceptions on what food sovereignty is, and help develop a more broader approach to what food sovereignty can be. And also with my education, I was able to create a food sovereignty implementation plan for CSKT titled CSKT Tribal Farms, where I presented in various educational settings and to gather support from local tribal departments and businesses in an attempt to try to pass this plan. And I was able to present it in September 2019. To begin with, I just want to be able to make sure everybody's on the same page of what food sovereignty is. So I used a definition that was created by a non-governmental organization out of the UN um, in Rome, 2002, just saying it is the rights of peoples, communities, and countries to define their own agricultural, labor, fishing, food, and land policies, which are ecologically, socially, economically, and culturally appropriate to their unique circumstances. It includes the true right to food and to produce food, which means that all people have the right to safe, nutritious, and culturally appropriate food, and to food producing resources and the ability to sustain themselves and their societies. This is, I think, it's important to acknowledge that, you know, when we talk about climate and, you know, the sharing of one Earth or one Mother Earth, that, you know, what we do here can effectively, you know, impact somebody that we don't see, a people that we don't see, a culture that we don't see, you know, an ecosystem that we don't see. And so having an understanding what food sovereignty is globally, you can incorporate it into your local community or your local organization. And so I included an Indigenous tribal food sovereignty definition, which was taken from the Indigenous Food Systems Network website. It's just saying that Indigenous food sovereignty is a specific policy approach to addressing the underlying issues impacting Indigenous peoples and our ability to respond to our own needs for healthy, cultural, adapted Indigenous foods. And when I say Indigenous or tribal food sovereignty, I want to also express that, you know, tribal people do not just exist here on the Americas, but Indigenous or tribal people are found all throughout the world. Even in before the nation states in Europe, many of those cultures and those peoples had traditional practices, traditional ecological knowledge of their local homelands that they practiced in terms of their procurement of food and other uses that they found with their wildlife on their homelands. So to better understand our local or our food system here in the U.S., I think it's important to go through and assess, you know, the different factors that take place in how I would say many, but not all, people get their foods here in the United States. Many people relying on low-income food assistance programs, rely on supermarket style ways to get their foods going to market. Being able to you know, understand that, you know, with these means of convenience that many of us depend on, that we have lost a connection with our food. Many people used to have large family gardens to be able to sustain themselves in terms of fruits and vegetables. And because of supermarkets and other fast food types of businesses, we've kind of lost that connection and have been more dependent on a food system than being able to, you know, address our local needs or our individual needs, family needs. Also, it's important to look at the players who are actively, you know, making decisions or are in response and have responsibility over how we get our foods here in the United States. And it's important to look at those multinational corporations such as Archer Daniels, Midland, Cargill, and Monsanto's that just, you know, receive multi-million-dollar subsidies and are using that money not necessarily to assist in supporting large-scale farming and large-scale farmers, but making it more as a way of keeping them in keeping them in contracts that that limit their success in terms of such an important industry that they're in, feeding us all, that they're not getting the proper um, financial success that they could receive if they weren't being dominated by these multi-million-dollar corporations. Also next is just to look at those types of industries in the industrial agriculture practices that take place. Many of these production activities create extreme burdens on our climate. They demand land and water. Many of these large-scale farming activities are infesting ground and water with toxic agriculture byproducts. They create mass deforestation across the globe for mostly livestock production, and they also deplete local water resources from lakes, rivers, and streams. It is if you look at the timeline of the Flathead Reservation, and because of allotment and livestock agriculture, many lands along the Flathead River and the Jocko River are the soils have been depleted, and the ability to grow foods on those lands have been harmed, and it will take a good conservation effort to bring those lands back. Also, just the inclusion of fossil fuels, the use of fossil fuels in farm production or in food production in farming, and also the carbons that are released during long transportation of foods to get to processing or further production, that these carbons are being released into the air and just furthering greenhouse gas emissions and having effect on climate change. And as an example, here on the Flathead, just an issue that we face for local livestock ranchers is many of them are yearling producers, where they produce cows or bison or whatever type of livestock that they have for 1 to 2 years, and then it's transported to feedlots where they're fed until full capacity, where then they are shipped again to large-scale processing plants. And many times that these processing plants could be 15,000 miles away. It could be in St. Louis, Missouri, where they're going to be processed into steaks and hamburger, and then transported back to Montana. And so the mileage that many of our foods have to travel limit the production capabilities, that being able to fully grow your food or your plants or your fruits or vegetables or your livestock to its full ability is limited whenever it has to make those long travels. And something that we are looking here is to trying to create more access to local slaughtering to limit that need. To contrast our current system, I wanted to just give a little overview of what indigenous or localized agriculture looks like, just to paint a better picture. To understand and to envision what indigenous agriculture is, or localized agriculture, it's important to understand that food is medicine, and when I say that, you really have to understand the types of foods that you're putting in your body, understanding that these foods have medicinal value, antioxidant, or else helping with your bone growth, just all these health benefits that whenever we have that relationship with our food, that we're not just looking at it as ways to sustain ourselves for a time being, but as a means to ensure that we're healthy in a holistic way. And also, whenever you have that relationship with your food, the ways that you procure your food, and the indigenous stewardship that many tribes have with their local homelands or Mother Earth, is a relationship built on reciprocity and renewal, and understanding that sustainability and is the ultimate goal, and that we aren't just trying to make a quick buck, but we're hoping to use these foods as a way to sustain ourselves for years to come. And that also then that breaks into into wildlife agriculture, and then that kind of is the hunter gatherer type of lifestyles that many tribal communities or tribal cultures, tribal identities identify with. That's hunting for large game, small game, such as bison, deer, other rabbits, other types of wildlife, fish, birds. There's a whole, the whole wildlife agriculture is strong, especially in hunting, in tribes throughout I would say, if you know where bison and elk live, those tribes are strongly connected to those types of foods. Also, the gathering of wild plants as food and medicine is something that is practiced strongly here and through tribes throughout the United States and North America and South America. There are domesticated agriculture focused tribes that have focused on domesticated agriculture for hundreds and almost thousands of years, such as the Hidatsa, Zuni, Hopi, Iroquois, the Aztecs, Mayans, and Incans. They range from small or large gardens to even large farms. This type of agriculture has built great civilizations, that we read in our history books. And, that type of knowledge and understanding is something that and as a Zuni person, that I have come to realize as an important aspect in our decolonization efforts of agriculture. That we weren't all hunters and gatherers, and that we did grow food, food such as corn that was spread throughout the world, and many cultures rely upon, was started in Mesoamerica and spread through trade throughout the world, and those are, and potatoes, and such as potatoes too, as well, in the Incans. Those are important gifts that we have given to the rest of the world, and not many people acknowledge that. There has been the acknowledgement by the Irish during the potato famine, and many tribes sending potatoes over to Ireland to help assist during that need. And those types of histories aren't necessarily taught in our history books, but are a major force in why I do this. Also, just to carry on, adaptability. And when I say adaptability, many times native or indigenous communities have to adapt to their current environment or their current situation. That can mean many things. Currently, we're living in a COVID crisis, and on the Flathead Reservation, many food distribution efforts have occurred, and that's a more contemporary view of adaptability. But also, adaptability can mean the way that we collect our seeds and the seed saving that is done in our food production. When we collect seeds every year after each harvest, the seed or the plant adapts to its environment, and that can mean many things. That can mean that not that certain pesticides or fertilizers may not have to be used that next year because that plant has adapted to its environment, and or else having to deal with the drought or disease, that these plants are adapted to their environment and can overcome those types of issues. Also, indigenous agriculture could mean using organic or natural fertilizers and pesticides, just using compost and things like that could also assist in not having to rely upon synthetic fertilizers or pesticides. Activities such as permaculture that incorporates self-sustaining food systems where plants rely on each other to succeed or to be able to thrive in their own environments without necessarily the need for human interaction. That is it's a growing permaculture is a growing movement here on the Flathead Reservation. If you're interested, Hot Springs has a annual event, weekly event where they focus on permaculture. Then carrying on community-sponsored agriculture or CSA programs can help communities be able to address their local needs by creating local farms that produce foods for local community members who buy into their program and act as shareholders, and can help localize foods as well as help their local farmers in their activities as well. And it also promotes more efficient planning in terms of food production and farmers production of their annual harvests. The next is tribal sponsored agriculture. This is a relatively new concept, just more focused on tribal communities and certain social programs that exist within the tribal government that help assist tribal members when it comes to food. And if you create a tribal sponsored agriculture production program, certain businesses such as casinos or certain USDA programs can assist in supporting the financial side of these TSA programs. I wanted to highlight with some pictures of just what I meant by food procurement from tribal communities and wildlife. The woman on the left is a Salish woman. She is peeling, it's called camas root, but it's or bitterroot, sorry. And this is an annual activity that Salish and Pondere and Kootenai tribal members participate in. The bitterroot was an important food during a food drought during the early 1900s, and bitterroot was a food that is very important to the tribes here, and has got them through a dark time. The picture on the right is two individuals who are hunting bison. It's important to show that their hunt didn't just involve the bison, but also invited and included the two wolves that were hunted before the bison hunt to create a disguise for the hunters, and that nothing was ever necessarily disposed of, but was used or recycled, if you will, in a way that could be used again for another activity. And there's plenty of pictures around the internet about the important uses of the bison and how all parts of the bison were used. And I think that in terms of, how we, develop things out of fossil fuels such as plastics and things like that, and, are easily thrown away, that, that this is a practice in tribal communities across the world, that using all parts of the animal and all parts of the plant is important whenever these practices were done. This is a Zuni waffle garden. It's a form of sustainment farming. This is a picture from I think 2011 or 1911 from the Museum in New Mexico, just depicting the type of sustainment farming that Zunis and other Pueblo communities in the Southwest had to develop to combat issues such as drought in their communities. And these were done in large scale gardening that families would oversee, and would grow food for their clans or their multiple families in their community. This is a Hidatsa large-scale farm depicted in a drawing. I wasn't able to get where this was gotten from, but just depicting that that tribes were successful, and they understood large-scale agricultural practices, and that when the first colonizers, settlers came over, that these civilizations did exist, and that we weren't just running wild in the woods, but we had civilizations and cultural identities, and many of them were formed around farming. This picture depicts the Three Sisters, which is sort of a form of permaculture. The squash and the corn and the beans rely upon each other to be able to thrive in their environment. The beans will climb up the stalk of the corn. The corn will give shade to the squash and the beans, and the squash protects the ground with leaf cover, ensuring that the soil stays moist. And so this interaction with these three plants, or these three foods, is shared amongst tribes throughout Turtle Island or North America, and just shows how that how plants interact with each other, and how they have relationships with each other. Now that I've discussed, kind of the system that we currently are in, and what indigenous or tribal food sovereignty looks like, I wanted to kind of go about what and how food sovereignty can be incorporated into your life, or your household, family, or your community. And something that, again, that I focus on is indigenous rights, indigenous civil engagement, and that may be through voting or advocacy. That I wanted to ensure that food sovereignty can happen in any community. And so, again, I'm from the tribal community, but and there's certain ways that tribal governance and tribal communities can engage in food sovereignty, which I've gone through a little bit, but it really does incorporate the type of understanding from leadership, and leadership who makes decisions, and leadership who creates programs and projects, that envisioning something for food sovereignty incorporates cultural norms and community needs, and that these types of these types of needs in a tribal community don't necessarily coincide with non-tribal communities, but that non-tribal communities can identify their own cultural identities within their community or their own community needs and incorporate those into plans or advocacy so that their local communities can better represent the people who live in it and what they need. And when I talk about food sovereignty, I believe, I've come to believe that there's 4 different levels of food sovereignty that we can incorporate into our lives. The first one is personal, then it's household, community, and then governmental. And I'll go through those here in the next slides. When I say personal food sovereignty, what that means is your personal want to educate yourself in where you're getting your food, the type of foods that you're getting, and then incorporating that into knowledge where you're learning how to cook your food, how to process your food so that it can extend its shelf life. How can you better manage your food so that it's you're not wasteful? These are all types of ways that you can educate yourself to ensure that no food is being wasted. Next is nutrition. Many times our nutrition, sometimes we want to have a burger or want to go out and have a greasy meal, and it may not always be that you want to reach for nutritional food, but this is just your personal food sovereignty and what you decide, what your decision making is on a daily basis or based on what meal you're going to have at that moment. I advocate for a predominantly nutritional balanced diet. But sometimes, you need a little break, and a burger sounds good sometimes, and that's totally fine. It's just ensuring that you are staying aligned with what your body needs, and ensuring that you are staying healthy with nutritional foods. And then next would be procurement. This could mean where you're getting your food. Are you going to, I don't know if they have Aldi's here, but or if you know what an Aldi is, but like a dollar store style or lower priced food supermarket, or are you going to the good food store, or are you going to the farmer's market? Also, food procurement could also mean that your involvement with the community or support of the community may mean you go to a farm, or you do go to that farmer's market because you want to help those local food producers. Or are you participating in a CSA to help your local farmer? Where you get your food is important, and understanding who you get your food from is also important. Then also lifestyle. Sometimes, you may be too busy, and sometimes you're on the go, and you have to find ways to ensure that you're having a nutritional, well-balanced meals. And so, you have to, plan out those meals, or else, you could be succumbed to having to rely on fast foods. And so that's one example, but also other lifestyles include hunting and gathering lifestyle that many people still participate in. There's different types of lifestyles, and the foods that pertain to those lifestyles are just as important. Next would be traditional practices. Like I said, hunting and gathering, or still growing of traditional foods or gathering of those traditional foods. That these traditional practices are still being practiced today. One example, myself, I am Ojibwe from Minnesota, which has a lot of wild rice. And even though I'm in Montana, I'm still able to access wild rice from friends who gather it in northern Minnesota, and being able to, help support those efforts and those activities is something that is beneficial to both I as a consumer and them as the gatherer. And so that's something that I value, and I want to help support that. Next would be household food sovereignty. And inside each household, families or the people who live in that household have values. These values can be many different things. They can be starting a garden and really understanding that, knowing where your food comes from, having it come from your backyard, could be something that's important to the household. Also, just having kids myself, it is important to me that my children have important nutritional diets, so that they're developing, into strong humans or strong adults. And so those are things that the household may value, and you want to incorporate into your meals or your how you the foods you eat. Next would be your family or household structure. This can mean many things. In the classic American family structure, there's parents, and those parents have jobs, and those jobs support the family and being able to buy food. That may be something that is common in American lifestyle, or else being able to go out and fish and hunt. And there may be certain people in the family who are dedicated to that activity. That understanding who is the person who procures the food, who goes out hunting, or even goes out to the local, who's the one who's purchasing the foods at the supermarket or grocery store or out at market. Those people in that family structure are responsible for that, and it's important to acknowledge who does that, and because they are the decision makers in those settings. Procurement, again, is from everything from hunting, gathering. The picture I've put right here is some Zuni corn that myself and my wife and kids had a couple years ago, and it's Zuni corn from New Mexico. But I was able to grow it here in Montana, and it thrived beautifully. And that's the way that I wanted to get my corn that year. And so our family grew corn, a large corn garden, and that's just an example. Education and knowledge, again, this can mean many things, from hunting and gathering, the whole activity of going out and finding the animal, or finding the plant that is going to be gathered, what to look for, how to process that food, is all education and knowledge. For example, a family might have a grandmother or a grandfather who holds that knowledge, and being able to incorporate that knowledge is important for the rest of the family, so that everyone ensures that they have food. So it may be the grandma or grandpa, it may be the father, mother, or even the brother, who is the one who goes, or sister who goes out, who goes out and procures those food. and they may be the one who holds that knowledge, and they're the educator or the teacher in that setting. Next, again, would be traditional practices. This also could mean many things. Again, the hunter-gathering type of activities, but also could also mean cultural practices. As a Zuni, we have 144 annual ceremonies that we practice every year, and this coincides. This is our spirituality that coincides with how we grow our foods, and the efforts that we are putting in for our annual harvests, and that we're praying for good rain season, a good harvest, so that our whole community or our whole tribe is healthy, that we have nothing to worry about. These are all ceremonies that tribes like mine, or tribes like Zuni, practice every year, that help alongside with their annual farming activities. Next would be community food sovereignty. This is a picture of myself and collaborator Michael Billington on our CSKT farms. This is just an example of how relationships are built within community members. Again, these are different community members, such as tribal leaders or tribal department heads, the college, USDA officials, in an attempt to create a plan to address food sovereignty here on the Flathead Reservation. And this is just one example of how communities involved, but another example could be the relationships that are built in a community that has multiple or diverse foods being produced in it. One producer could be growing one food that is traded or bartered for to another producer who is creating a different food. And the more diverse the community has of their food, the more opportunity or more diverse that each community member could have in terms of the foods that they have access to. Also, community needs, something that COVID-19 has kind of exposed, was that communities are in need, or have food needs that aren't being addressed by food assistance programs such as SNAP or the commodities program, that that other programs need to be created that help support families or individuals that are in need. And this is one way that that a community can support other community members, but community support can also look like supporting a local business that it could just supporting local businesses that are getting food to the community, being able to support those financially, or going to restaurants that small businesses like that, being able to support those small businesses or restaurants so that they can, again, keep a diverse source of food within the community. Next would be tribal or non-tribal government food sovereignty. This is something, again, that I've focused on since 2016, and I want to stress again that it's not just tribal communities, but non-tribal governments such as municipalities or county, state governments, even all the way up to the federal government, such as the USDA, and the type of assistance that they get to producers across the United States. That each level has certain policies that are written, and and those policies or rules for their jurisdictions play important part in how programs are developed or how food is being produced on that in that jurisdiction, or processed or sold in that jurisdiction. That these rules help guide the way for food sovereignty efforts. And next would be decision making, these and leadership, and even in vision within that leadership. It's important to have leadership that holds a vision that wants to see food sovereignty efforts, not just take off, but be sustained, for the existence of the tribe. That they have a vision that there are people who do need these services that aren't, that we may not see right now, but are out there, and that those decision makings need to have, or the decision needs to be made that the government or the tribe or the community is caring for each community member. Next would be funding. Funding is important to any food sovereignty activity. There's sustainable programs in the USDA that pertain to all different activities that are included in farming or food sovereignty activities. It's just finding the right ones to be able to help support whatever activity you're doing. Next would be natural resources. Using natural resources of the community to help further these activities is important. Here on the Flathead Reservation, there's adequate land and water and other timber resources to be able to carry out a successful food sovereignty program. And it's important to look at those natural resources and use them in a sustaining way to be able to come up with solutions for these issues. Next would be in technical expertise. It's important to have people who have knowledge of farming or knowledge of processing, distribution, that these are all activities that get you from the backbone to the end mile. If you're considering it, the producer to the consumer, that there has to be people that are knowledgeable about how to make that an easy process. Then culture, being able to incorporate different cultural identities. The CSKT consists of 3 different tribes, the Salis, the Kalispe, and the Kasanka. And those 3 tribes, all 3 of them have different identities, and being able to incorporate all 3 identities is important to the food sovereignty attempts here. But it's important in whatever community that is looking towards food sovereignty efforts, that they incorporate all the cultural identities that are willing to participate in these activities. Also, traditional ecological knowledge is important, or is kind of the foundation of what I've been talking about in terms of food sovereignty in tribal communities. These are the lessons, or the knowledge that has been passed down from generation to generation. We say from since time immemorial. That may mean it could be our first interaction as a tribe with that certain animal or plant. All those traditional ecological knowledge are incorporated in whatever plan. And then traditional agricultural practices. This just consists of again communities such as the tribes that I've talked about before: Zuni, Mayan, Aztec, Hidatsa, Iroquois. that all these tribes, as an example, there's other tribes throughout the world who were successful in agriculture, that they're looked at, that their histories are looked at, and their agricultural practices are looked at, and looked at as a way to be incorporated into a contemporary food system. Then community needs. This can be done in a series of ways. Something that I've created was a community needs assessment. This just breaks it down to what the community, the issues that they're facing, and how to come up with solutions to those issues. And that those issues can be about procurement, how they get their food, do they have access to USDA quality processing plants or slaughterhouses, which is important for any funding that food sovereignty program is trying to reach for from the federal government or the USDA. That there's certain needs that need to be met to ensure that certain activities can be carried out. And then distribution as well. Is there a place for people to receive this food, or is there a system for people to receive this food who may not have adequate transportation or financial ability to make it to a centralized location? These are certain factors that need to be included in distribution. And then finally, governmental support. Governmental support is absolutely crucial to any community who's trying to advance food sovereignty or food security. That the government needs to help assist in one way or another, in one resource or another, to ensure that that these activities are carried out in a successful way. And to the right is she's a local horticulturalist for the tribe here in the forestry program. She is growing huckleberries for their conservation efforts, just to reintroduce huckleberries into areas that have been depleted. This is an activity that the forestry program does. They also focus on white bark pine and sweetgrass and other traditional plants that are culturally important to the tribes here. And that is it. Thank you for listening. Is there any questions?
Yeah, so hi, Patrick, Mr. Yawakie. I'm the sustainability intern, and thank you so much for such a great presentation. I have a question for you. What actions can we take today to support Indigenous food sovereignty? You did list how we can personally increase our own food sovereignty, such as choosing where we get our food from, and I was wondering if there's actions we can take specifically to support Indigenous food sovereignty, or maybe if there's local vendors that are Indigenous that we should support.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, something that I was, it was an honor to be part of was a co-creation of, it's called the Flathead Reservation Community Action Group here on the Flathead Reservation. Just the creation of a food distribution program out of the Kicking Horse Job Corps. You can find their information on Facebook, but they've been giving out food since March, distributing food in terms of response to COVID. That's one way. You could also, I mean, it's not easy to purchase a whole cow, but there are local ranchers, tribal ranchers here on the reservation who who do ranch, and being able to help support them is something something that would be appreciated. And again, our food distribution program here for on the Flathead for FERCA, or Flathead Res Community Action, is purchasing local beef and bison. And if you're working with an organization who is distributing food, there is more cost-effective ways to ensure that there's meat protein in your distributions. Other than that, I would say just there are tribes across the nation who are a little bit more down the road in terms of their food sovereignty efforts than CSKT, but CSKT is currently, because of COVID, focused on food sovereignty efforts and is looking to expand that into the next year. So just be looking out for that. Other than that, there's right now on the Flathead, it's pretty much like advocacy and then response to COVID, but it's hoping to carry on into the next year. But I would say if you want to contribute to, there's the Blackfeet tribe. Also, it's called Fast Blackfeet, have been focused on food sovereignty efforts and also food distributions in their community too as well. So there is efforts across the state of Montana, not just this tribe, that are focused on ensuring that their community members' needs are met, and that local food or production of, or use of local foods is being incorporated in that effort. You can look on if you'd like to help donate. Flathead Res Community Action has a link on their page to donate to as well.
Yeah, I think someone posted the link in the chat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm curious, is the full cow right now that you would purchase because there's not very many slaughtering facilities in Montana, or is it just that's what they? I would love to purchase meat that way, but I cannot house a whole cow in my studio apartment. So I guess that's my question.
Yeah, and those are investments. My family, we invested in a freezer, a deep freeze. It's just and it's a big choice that we had to make, because we didn't want to have to spend, going to the supermarket and the current price of beef right now. It's something that we just didn't want to do. But yeah, can you repeat again?
I was just asking if it was also the whole cow because of the lack of slaughtering facilities.
Oh yeah, yeah. It stems, because of COVID, the shutting down of restaurants and shutting down of that type of economy has put a burden on producers, not finding ways to bring large amounts of beef to slaughter. There is also, again, here on the Flathead, a lack of USDA certified slaughterhouses here, and so they have to, again, work with the schedule of one slaughterhouse here on the reservation, or else have to ship their cows to a place like St. Louis, Missouri, if they were to do it that way.
Thank you I just had a presentation today where someone was proposing to change permitting in Montana so that it's less USDA. Anyways, I don't even really eat meat unless it's hunted, but it's cool to hear about this. Thank you.
the Blackfeet are looking to create a large scale slaughterhouse on their reservation, which would assist in their bison program too as well. And then also there's a local tribal member here out of St. Ignatius who was awarded some funding to create a mobile slaughterhouse. Which also those local or those slaughterhouses are in dire need just because of the lack of transportation that a lot of tribal members have.
It looks like we're about at time. So I would say maybe if there's one more question, we could do that. And then I don't want to take up too much of your time, Patrick. Thank you so much for this presentation and being here. So I would say if there's one more question, we can take that. And then if not, then we'll wrap up.
I see Caitlin. Hello.
Hello. Unless does anyone else have one? I don't need to. I don't want to repeat anything, but I'm sorry I missed the beginning. But I was wondering if there are any like statewide policies related to food sovereignty that would be useful in any way, or if it's mostly just like local policy changes.
In terms of,
or I guess when you brought up like policy change as part of food sovereignty, like what specific changes do you see as the most needed?
well, there is, in terms of COVID response, Steve Bullock, in terms of the state government policy, they've issued assistance to any type of slaughter activities that are needed within tribal communities or any community here in Montana as a support. But other types of policy focused on food sovereignty in terms of the tribal communities is, again, like Sierra said, limiting some of those USDA requirements if they're going to be sold or used within the state of Montana or within the tribal jurisdiction. If there's going to be a policy written on certain types of wild game that may want to be, like, I'll give an example, that wild game that wants to be used in schools, that there's a process that makes it easier for that wild game or that tribal producer or tribal hunter to get their meat into the school with use of certain funding, and it's a long road till then, because again, food sovereignty is just it's just relatively new in terms of mainstream and tribal mainstream terminology, and so but there are tribes across the country who are focused on how their locally grown or locally hunted foods are being able to be sold within their jurisdictions.
Cool, thanks.
Cool. Well, I think we'll wrap up with that then. Thank you for everyone who, oh, sorry, Sierra, were you gonna ask something?
It's okay, I'm sorry. I just had another question and I know we don't have time. I'm just really interested. Sorry.
Well, I don't know if you have my email. You can most definitely ask me questions, or if you want to just connect on food sovereignty at any time. My last name, Yawakie, Yawakie, and then work, WORK, at gmail.com.
Thank you.
Yep.
And thank you again, Patrick, for taking the time to speak with us. And thank you everyone who participated.
Thank you. It's a great opportunity.